Hi everyone and welcome back to another Preptober video. Today I'm going to give you some quick hacks for NaNoWriMo that might be useful to know before NaNoWriMo starts. I have 6 tips to share with you today and I'm going to get right on into them because, again, busy month. Now my first tip is to at least consider writing your story in a dual POV. Or multiple POV, actually, it doesn't have to be dual, but to write from more than one character's point of view. The reason I think this is a very good tip is because if you get so sick and tired of one character and you just hate being in their head and being where they are, being them, shifting over to a different character, even if they are in the same place, could really change how you feel about your story. I am a huge fan of writing dual POV. I'm doing it currently for the story I'm working on in October, and I'm also going to do it for NaNoWriMo, but more on that in next week's video. But I think writing multiple POV just opens up the world to you in a different way and allows you to A, get to know more characters in depth in a different way than you would have if you just saw them as secondary characters or just saw them from your character A's eyes, basically. But it's also really interesting to tell a scene from different characters' point of view. Now I'm not saying you should write every chapter first from character A, then from character B, then the second chapter character A, character B, and so on. But I do think that some chapters are better told from a different person's point of view. And that might depend on the story, and I might have a story where that is really beneficial, but it's worth considering. And even if you decide that you're not going to do it, if you find yourself mid-nano and everything just sucks and you can't figure out how to move forward with your story, try changing the POV. Try having a second character either in the same place as your main character, the one who's told the story up until this point, or see if you can have a different point of view that takes place in a different place in the world. That could be the villain, it could be just a second main character that you will, like, their paths will eventually cross, or something else. I think it's a really fun thing to do. I'm a huge fan of it and a big advocate for it, and I should probably stop trying to sell this idea to you, but at least consider it because it can help save your nano. My second tip is to write out of order. I know, just bear with me. I think a fairly common problem to have during nano or during any writing project is that you want to get from point A to point B and you might not always know how to get there. This can be true regardless if you're a plotter or a pantser. But for me, I sometimes know, okay, but my characters are doing this, they have to go through this thing to get here. And sometimes I don't want to write this middle bit. This middle bit is boring. I am not excited to write it as I am to write a future scene instead. And so sometimes I just opt out. I decide to not write the big chunk right here and just go from interesting scene to interesting scene. It's not a perfect tip because it means you end up with gaps in your story, and sometimes those gaps, even if they feel boring to write, are important for the story. Depends on your project, of course, but sometimes you can't really just jump from exciting scene to exciting scene to exciting scene to exciting scene. You need some of the middle bits, you need to land occasionally. And there have been times when I've skipped parts and then actually gone back to fill those in later, because it might just be that I'm not feeling them right now, but a week from now I can totally go back and write them. Or the opposite, you reach the end of your story, you hit 50k and or the end of your story, and then you have half of it written because half of it is gaps. It depends a bit on what you're going for here, if the win is the most important or if the finished story is the most important. But even if you want to write the end and have everything for draft 1 done, when NaNoWriMo is over, it can still be beneficial to skip those parts and then come back to them. If that makes your writing flow and if it makes you more excited about your story again, it could be beneficial. My third tip is to always carry around a notebook or at least have a designated place on your phone where you just write everything in. Preferably have this be organized and not just have quote you want to include, character name, a setting, a piece of world building. Try to have it in some sort of order because it is easier to find things. But at the very least, carry something around where you can always jot down ideas because you never know when inspiration is going to strike, and it sucks being out and about and not having anything to put it down on. If you're more of a notebook person than a phone person, there are plenty of BuJo or bullet journal videos, which could be good to figure out a good system to put the notes in. But basically any sort of like header, if that header is characters, and then a list of character names or traits you want to include, and then a different header that is world building, and so on and so forth, could be good. I'm personally a big fan of notebooks, but I also have a tendency to not fill them, and I do always have my phone on me, so maybe I should opt for phone this year. My fourth tip is sort of related to this, and that is to use Google Docs for your writing. Now I know a lot of you love Scrivener, I love Scrivener, but Google Docs is accessible from pretty much anywhere as long as you have an internet connection. And there is the offline version, so there's that. Personally, I'm going to be traveling for the first third of NaNoWriMo, and I'm not going to have my computer with me, which means I'm going to do some writing on my phone instead. And most of us have our phones with us at work as well, and then during your lunch break or your bathroom break or something else, you can still get a few words in, which is good because that leaves less writing to do once you're home from work. My fifth tip is to make a character list. Now this is something I have not done for my October project, at least not yet as I'm filming it, and it's kind of coming back to bite me in the ass. Now maybe this is different for plotters than it is for me, who's sort of a plantser when it comes to this project at least. I have my main characters, I know what their names are, but every time I introduce a new character, even if it's just like, oh, the neighbor, Richard, I want to have that in a document, and I want to be able to cross-reference, like, what was the name of the neighbor? Oh, it was Richard. Or who was Richard? Ah, it was the neighbor. Because I know, for example, Richard is a name I've used in my book, but I don't remember who Richard is. A minor character somewhere, but I need to know who he is. And it's a good thing to have this kind of character list and add to it as you go. And at first it can just be names and what role they play. So you have Anna, who's the main character, and you have Beatrice, who is her sister, and you have Charles, who is the sister's boyfriend or something. But the more you find out about the characters, the more info you put in. Maybe Charles has green eyes, put that in. Maybe Anna loves to watch figure skating, add that in. And this might already be done for you. This work might already be done if you've done character profiles, which I don't tend to do, at least not until I've already started my story, and I don't tend to do them for Nano because limited time there. But I think it's beneficial to have that sort of list and just add people in and add traits and whatever in as you learn them, because then you can always come back to that as opposed to scroll through pages and pages and pages of your story trying to figure out what size shoe Richard wears or what color eyes Charles has. And this helps because if you stay consistent through your story, once you go back to edit, you don't have to, you know, change green eyes into blue 57 times. If you remember that they are blue from the beginning, it's much easier. Now my sixth and final tip is to food prep. This doesn't really have anything to do with writing, but seeing as how November is probably going to be quite a busy month and you want to get those words in, try to food prep when you can. Now you probably can't food prep for the entire month of November in October, but maybe you can make some dishes and put them in lunch boxes in the freezer and then just heat them up as you need them. Or make sure to make twice as much food when you cook in November so that you have extra leftovers which can serve you or your family throughout the month. It helps, it saves time, and it leaves more time for you to write. So it's a win all around. Those were the 6 tips I had for you today. Next week I'm going to share with you what my plan for NaNoWriMo is, what project I'm going to work on, and I'm excited to share it with you and excited to get started with it. I will see you again next week, and I hope you have a good one. Bye!